Name that song. No idea, right? That song is actually a huge hit from the 90s that everybody at one point or another has heard. However, there's one key ingredient that's missing, and it's the same thing that's probably missing in your golf swing right now. Do you know what that thing is? Do you know what was missing there? Well, let me try this song again and see if it makes any sense the second time around, and I'm going to add just one simple ingredient to it. Any ideas now? It's the famous Foo Fighters song, Monkey Wrench. That's the intro to it. All I did differently? Rhythm and tempo. That's it. I played the exact same notes the first time around, but I played them without any rhythm and tempo that matches the song, so it was unrecognizable. The golf swing, for many of you, may be the exact same way. You may be working on the mechanics of your golf swing, which you must do to improve, but without that key ingredient of rhythm and tempo, you're not going to understand how to put the swing together. I've said in other videos that rhythm and tempo is the glue that holds crappy golf swings together, but it also holds great golf swings together. Rhythm and tempo is what takes all these mechanical movements and blends them into what we perceive as a golf swing. And the key is that rhythm and tempo is required, proper rhythm and tempo, in order for all of these mechanical things to pay off. You have to have great mechanics and great rhythm and tempo to make it sound like a song, to make it look like a golf swing. The trick is when we're learning these things, there's a couple stages that you have to go through. When you're learning a song on the guitar, typically you learn the left hand first. Sound familiar yet? This is going to make more sense for all you rotary swing guys out there in a second. The left hand is all the mechanics. So I know that my finger has to play this note and press down here and then move to this one, and I've got to switch fingers and move up and down the fretboard, and I learn the mechanics of the song first. The right hand is rhythm and tempo and speed. It's the drive behind everything, but the control and the notes are coming from the left hand. Exactly like how you learn rotary swing. You have to learn the mechanics in a structured way first so that you can learn where your fingers have to be. Obviously, if I just try to play that same song with the same rhythm and tempo, so I've got, same, pretty much that's the rhythm and tempo of the intro to Monkey Wrench, but if I play the wrong notes, it doesn't sound like Monkey Wrench anymore, does it? That's because mechanics are the most important part that you have to learn first. However, a lot of golfers don't ever get past that part of working on their mechanics. They only sit there, drilling away, working on mechanics, but they don't ever glue it together, and they miss that step because that's where the real payoff is. It doesn't sound like music till you add rhythm and tempo. It's not going to feel like a golf swing. It's not going to produce the right results until you add rhythm and tempo. Well, how do you do that in a golf swing? That is a trick. Great thing is, today I'm going to introduce to you a training aid that's actually going to make this really, really easy for you. It's going to turn your mechanical golf swing into a rhythmical piece of music. All right, Chuck, that's all fine and good. I get I need rhythm and tempo. I got to work on mechanics and all that stuff. But how do you work on rhythm and tempo? Well, in the past, we've sold training aids like the Orange Whip and the Gold Flex, and those are great, but I had two issues with them. One, the Orange Whip was too expensive. And two, you couldn't hit balls with it. So yes, like many of you have probably found, your practice swings and your real swings don't always kind of feel the same because that ball gets in the way, little white devil. So having a training aid with a soft shaft in it is excellent for rhythm, but if you can't hit balls with it, it's kind of pointless because you're not able to transfer that smooth swinging motion into hitting a ball, because as soon as the ball gets there, your swing completely changes. We've all been there to where the practice swing and the real swing are never the same. In fact, it's such a big deal. I did a video on it to explain exactly why that happens. So check out that link in the description up in the corner or description down below. But what we want to talk about today is how do we get great rhythm? Now, as you guys know, I typically hate training aids. In fact, I sell very few on the site. For the last 15 years, I've hardly sold very many training aids at all, just a handful of them, because most of them are garbage, just to be flat out honest with you. But every now and then a training aid comes along that's actually worth its weight. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because this one is going to help you turn your golf swing into music. This is the key. You've got to be able to combine several things. One, having rhythm and tempo typically means for many people is just smoothing things out and slowing things down at the right time. And typically that's the transition. This is where people typically get off. The transition from the backswing to the downswing is where typically people speed up dramatically because they go to hit the ball. Now when you're using like an orange whip or something like that where you don't actually hit the ball, you don't find that hit urge, that impulse to fire from the top, because there is no ball. And that's why they're not as effective as one where you can actually hit the ball. That is where the G-force comes in. In fact, the G-force is the first one I've seen that you can actually hit a driver with. But they also have, we've had the other ones on the site for a while, the wedge and 7-iron and other irons, and these shafts are a little bit softer than the driver one. And I like that they stiffen the driver one up a little bit because it feels a little bit more realistic. These are really, really soft, and they're excellent for when you're first starting out trying to get a really smooth rhythm and tempo. But as you try to start swinging a little bit faster and try to translate as a one-to-one of what this feels like to a real club, they're a little bit difficult to make that step. The driver, though, actually feels reasonably close to a real driver, but of course much, much softer. But what it forces you to do is the same thing the other ones do, is to smooth out that transition and work on your rhythm and tempo while actually hitting balls. That's the critical piece. So, in fact, you can hit them pretty darn hard if you want. With this driver here, you can see how this thing's really, really soft. But I'm going to make my same swings just with a little bit smoother rhythm and tempo. 277 yards. That's not bad for a shaft that's super, super soft. But the key is it forces me to smooth out that transition and focus on my rhythm and tempo. I don't have to think about being rhythmical and smooth. This is going to make me do it. As soon as I try to get quick with the takeaway, this club's going to take over. It's going to start telling me where it wants to go. If you have a tendency to rip the club inside, it's going to go way inside and whip your hands all over the place, because once that momentum gets going and the shaft starts flexing, it's very difficult to control. So it forces you to be a little bit smooth, smooth to the top, smooth during the transition, and then smooth into the release. That is the key. So to make these mechanics that you've been working on, these great mechanics all come together and gel into a nice piece of music, you need to work on rhythm and tempo. Now, doing it just with your clubs is a little bit tricky, because if you take your normal driver, well, this thing isn't moving around much at all. In fact, this is a X-Flex shaft. It's very, very stiff. And so as soon as I pick the club with my hands, I lose a sense of feel for the club head compared to what that did, because I could feel the club head moving back and forth. This allows you to cheat a little bit. The stiff shaft allows you to push against it and be a little bit aggressive from the top, because it's not going to bend all out of plane and position like the G-force will. But when you pick the club up after using the G-force, then you're going to try and focus on feeling the same way. So I recommend, if you're going to practice at home or go to the range, make at least 5 or perhaps 10 swings, hitting balls, doing it of course. And all you want to really feel at first is the stress of the shaft loading at the top. And what I mean by that is, you go to the top, just be patient for a second and feel that shaft bend. Feel when the head stops drooping down, and then as you've got that stress in the shaft, start your transition back down with your weight shift and release the club. That's going to be your first step with this, is you really want to be nice and smooth from the top. Once you have that feeling, make a couple practice swings with your real club. This is going to feel really weird at first. In fact, even that swing felt weird. It feels so stiff and heavy, but if I try to focus on the same feelings I just did with those 5 or 10 swings with the G-force, my swing should be about the same and get me the results that I'm looking for. The trick again, glue these mechanics together with rhythm and tempo, and all of a sudden that mechanical choppy swing is going to start to feel like music. It's going to produce the results you're looking for, and more importantly, it's going to give you speed. And that's the last part that a lot of people don't really understand. If you're working on the mechanics, you're using a different side of your brain than what you want to be typically using, a different part of your brain than what you want to use when you're really going out to play. Mechanics is very logical thinking, it's very left brain, you're having to really kind of work through things analytically and critically. That's not how we move quickly, it's not how we move fast, that's all done at a subconscious level. But that rhythm and tempo is more of our creative side of our brain as well. That's the more artistic side. And so we need to glue those two together. But when you're working on the mechanics, like I was showing you in the guitar, I learn really, really slow at first. It takes me forever just to kind of get the mechanics of where my fingers need to be and so on and so forth. And that's all I focus on until I get the mechanics down. And then I start trying to play it in time, in rhythm and tempo. And it slowly starts speeding up. If I'm just working on the mechanics and just thinking about the technique and the positions, I can never play it fast. Just like in the golf swing. If you're just always working on the mechanics of your swing, you're never going to get back to your normal speed, because you're typically going to slow down a little bit because you have to. It's just the logical side of the brain, the way it thinks, the way it processes things is very, very slow and clunky and cumbersome. But you've got to transition out of that, and that's what a G-force is for. It's going to help you start to get the speed back. If you've just been focusing on mechanics, you're going to start to get the speed back that you're looking for in your golf swing and start playing the best golf that you've ever dreamed of. What you need to do, pick up a G-force today. We have them on our site at RotarySwing.com. I've got a great deal on them right now for members. So check out the G-force. I promise you it's going to help you with your swing.